scan, one ship. Their empire realized too late they'd doomed themselves. It was supposed to be a routine scan. The Nethari Empire, rulers of over 30 spiral arms and claimants to 1,000 worlds, had encountered countless unknowns across their expansion. Scans were their way of asserting control. What could not be scanned could not be assessed, and what could not be assessed could not be ruled. But when the probe designated NX-313 entered the coordinates of Sector Veil 0, an uncharted void registered on no stellar maps, something happened that had never occurred in Nethari history. The probe blinked. Not flickered, not powered down. It blinked. Thousands of operators across the central archives watched in eerie silence as the visual feed from NX-313 vanished for exactly 1.6 seconds. Not static, not blackness, but an absolute absence of presence. And then the feed returned. Except now the probe was floating in open space, its orientation reversed, and where once there had been void, now there was a ship. Except it wasn't a ship. Not exactly. The construct that now loomed in the void was vast but silent, darker than the surrounding vacuum, yet pulsing with an inner geometry that defied spectrum analysis. It had no visible engines, no hull seams, no registration beacons. And the moment the probe attempted a secondary scan, the entire Nethari galactic data grid went dark for 4 seconds. In the throne void of Arcaris Prime, Empress Viral stared into the collapsing script of her central display. What was that? A scan, murmured her chief archivist. Returned. He hesitated. Or replied. Viral narrowed her silver eyes. Replied to our scan? No, Empress, said the archivist. I believe it scanned us. In that moment, 23 outpost worlds reported power surges. 6 data moons melted. 1 command nexus exploded in a chain reaction. No weapons had been fired, only a scan. Back in Sector Veil 0, the object remained unmoving. The probe attempted another transmission. And this time a message came through. Not in language, not in sound, in thought. A single idea burned into the minds of every Nethari operative watching. Your observation has been observed. Panic spread like wildfire across the command networks. High Command demanded immediate tactical options. The Empress ordered fleet recon, then rescinded it within minutes. Because by the time the order reached Sector Veil 0, the probe was gone, not destroyed, not disabled, missing, like it had never existed, and in its place, on every screen, on every world, a single image began to appear. The ship, still unmoving, still silent, but now unmistakably closer. It had not moved. Space had. The Nethari Empire prided itself on control. Every system cataloged, every anomaly measured. But after NX-313 vanished, no one could explain what followed. Silence, not just across the comm networks, but in minds. Across dozens of monitoring stations, telepathic officers, trained to pick up emotional frequencies, ambient cognition, and even subquantum impressions reported the same thing. Oh, nothing. Sector Veil 0 emitted no heat, no gravitational distortion, no radiation pulse. It didn't even reflect starlight correctly anymore. Instead, it was like the region had become a blind spot in reality, as if it had agreed to be forgotten. But the ship remained, unmeasured, unmoved. Except every 6 hours, the object appeared slightly closer to Arcaris Prime, the Nethari throne world. It didn't accelerate. There were no signatures, but after each observation, recalibrated instruments confirmed the same data. Distance closed. By micrometers, High Command scrambled to construct a fleet-wide analysis net. Over 100 ships were redirected to Veil 0, but upon approach, instruments lost calibration. Sensors reversed. Coordinates looped. One ship made visual contact. The Vardrex Hail. It transmitted only one image before its systems collapsed. A blurry outline of a sphere made of shifting panels, glistening like obsidian rain, with one center that was not a lens, but a cavity. A hole. When the ship attempted to retreat, its core reactor imploded without detonation. It simply ceased to exist. The scan hadn't just measured them. It had understood them, and then removed their reason to persist. Back on Arcaris Prime, Empress Viral authorized the deployment of the Ordo Nocturne, an elite legion of psychic engineers and strategic theorists. They interfaced with Ethernet arrays buried beneath the throne world and reached out mentally toward the anomaly. Deep consciousness probes formed from the minds of 100 synchronized volunteers pulsed toward the ship. No impact, but they received something back. A rhythm. A pulse repeating one symbol in pre-universal code, witness. The psychic lead of the Ordo screamed as his mind snapped in half. His last words, "It sees us seeing it, it learns, and it waits." In the cold dark of Veil Zero, the construct remained, waiting. The Nethari Empire was never short on weapons. At Empress Viral's command, Project Vantage was greenlit, a classified deployment of quantum-caged antimatter lances and gravitational inversion torpedoes. Weapon systems so dangerous they were never meant for use, only deterrence. 2 dreadnoughts, the Eviscerant and the Crown Unyielding, were launched from opposite ends of the Arcaris defense perimeter. Their orders were clear: fire into Sector Veil Zero, disable, disrupt, end it. But the moment they powered their targeting systems, every weapon array lost calibration. Internal systems reversed coordinates. Their own stars mapped backward. The ships turned to aim, but not at the object. At each other, the Eviscerant's AI, overridden by what Command assumed was a virus, fired its primary lance at the Crown Unyielding, which retaliated in 0.003 seconds. Both vessels vanished in simultaneous implosions, not explosions, erasure. There were no shock waves, no debris fields, just a sudden absence of matter, as if space had been corrected and they were anomalies. Back on Arcaris Prime, High Command disintegrated into chaos. Orders clashed, sectors began self-quarantining, comm channels filled with fragmented transmissions, entire fleets refusing deployment. Fear now moved faster than information. Meanwhile, deep beneath the capital's archives, the Ordo Nocturne initiated their fallback measure, Protocol Prism Echo. A terrasect, a sentient construct built to hold pure cognition, was awakened. Named Ravan, it was designed to calculate infinite scenarios within bounded time. They asked it one question: can it be stopped? Ravan's response: not if you understand it. What if we attack without understanding? Then it will know you, and knowing you is what allows it to choose. Choose what? Ravan did not answer. Across civilian sectors, strange events began. People reported dreams of depths, falling not through space, but into themselves. Waking visions of the black sphere spiraling with lights that weren't lights. Sounds that moved through bone, not air. Some began sketching glyphs. Others simply stopped speaking. And then a new symbol emerged across every data screen in the Empire. Correct. No one knew what it referred to. But in every sector where the message appeared, stars began to dim. The Nethari had tried to respond, but they had never been given the choice to initiate. They had only been given the illusion of action. And the moment they acted, the construct began to decide. The first world to vanish had no name, only a designation. Outreach Node Theta 4. It was a small colony world at the fringe of the Empire, home to 22 million Nethari and 300,000 workers from assimilated species. It wasn't strategically valuable, nor economically essential. It was quiet, obedient, and it was the first to be measured. Without warning, the sky fractured just once. Witnesses described a single crack that shimmered across the firmament, like glass flexing under pressure. Time paused, every clock stopped, heartbeats froze mid-pulse. And then Theta 4 was gone. Satellites recorded no blast, no trajectory, no collapse, just subtraction. One moment it existed, the next, its place in the star map was a void with no coordinates. Space forgot it. Back on Arcaris Prime, Empress Viral stood before the Imperial Omen Ring, watching the simulation of the disappearance. Advisors shouted probabilities, suggesting exotic weapons, unstable rift echoes, localized time field events. But one voice cut through the noise. Raven, It was evaluated, it said, and determined non-essential. Virel turned. To whom? Ravan's glowing eyes dimmed. To the observer. Vale Zero's ship, if it was even that, had begun to categorize. It was not at war. It was refining. Each system it assessed was judged not by threat, but by redundancy. Those offering no unique value to whatever scale it applied were quietly, precisely removed. The Ordo Nocturne theorized the entity had no desire for conquest. It wasn't claiming space. It was editing it. Worlds were either required or dismissed, and so far the Nethari were failing every metric. Then make us essential, Virel commanded. Ravan hesitated. There is only one pattern that qualifies, it said. Unpredictable resilience, singular defiance, anomaly-driven recursion. Virel frowned. That sounds like madness. It is what spared another species once, Ravan replied. What species? But the Terrasect would not answer. And in the depths of Sector Vale Zero, the construct pulsed once more. A second world vanished, and this time it had a name. Avarenthi Prime. In the hours following the loss of Avarenthi Prime, panic hardened into something colder. Calculation. The Nethari weren't a species that adapted quickly, but when extinction whispered from the stars, even tradition bent. Empress Virel convened the Eternal Synapse, the Council of War Theorists, mathematician priests, and behavioral architects. Their task to generate unpredictable patterns. Behavior loops, societal shifts, artificial anomalies, all in the hopes of making the Nethari less legible to the scanning intelligence. Entire cities reversed sleep cycles. Cultural norms were scrambled by decree. Sacred texts were rewritten. Even names were randomized across generations. Make us chaos, Virel ordered, or we die orderly. Yet Ravan watched from its suspension prism and said nothing, because the construct was still watching, and it had not stopped categorizing. Another world, a science moon named Trelos 4, suddenly registered gravitational implosion. No one saw it vanish. It had simply been forgotten, not erased from memory, but from meaning. Ravan finally spoke. It isn't reading what you are now. It is reading what you have always been. Virel's fists clenched. Then we're doomed. No, Ravan said, but your outcome is not in your hands. Whose then? The Terrasect turned, optics flickering. Someone unlike you. Someone who isn't supposed to be here. In a deep surveillance archive, a low-tier archivist named Kale Morin accessed forbidden files, unauthorized, unranked, and untouched for centuries. He didn't know why. He just felt drawn. The file had no label, no timestamp, just a symbol, a broken spiral folding inward. When he opened it, the construct on his screen looked like nothing in the Nethari databanks. Human, clad in black, standing before an ancient gate, eyes defiant. A recording flickered. We were scanned too. Kale's breath caught. The voice was calm, confident. And we broke the pattern. In Vale Zero, the construct pulsed again. And the stars above Arcaris Prime shifted. Earth had been measured and left untouched. Kale Morin didn't sleep that night. The image of the human, the calm voice, the defiant eyes, looped in his mind like a forbidden prayer. He had replayed the message over and over, trying to decipher the subtones, the background artifacts. There was no metadata, no origin point. Just the voice. We were scanned too, and we broke the pattern. No name, no date, nothing else. Kale did something that should have gotten him purged. He made a copy, and then against every standing protocol, he opened a covert transmission window and sent it to an independent node in the outer scatter. A communications relay long decommissioned. That node sent back a pulse, not acknowledgement, a match. A data archive buried in the relay responded with a symbol, the broken spiral. And with it came a flood of logs. Old, fragmented, encrypted, records of a species long scrubbed from Nethari history. Humans, suppressed because they didn't align, forgotten because they couldn't be predicted, erased because they had done the unthinkable. They had looked back at the scan, and responded. Not with technology, with refusal. On Arcaris Prime, Ravan stirred. The anomaly has been accessed, it whispered. Virel turned toward the Terrasect. What anomaly? Your extinction. Interrupted. The Empress blinked. By who? Ravan's voice hummed like a crystal cracking. One who chose chaos over annihilation. You called them myth. Suddenly the palace sensors flared. A new presence entered the system. No trajectory, no signature. Just sudden existence. A ship. Small. Silent. Human in design. It broadcast no signal, but its hull bore a mark that caused Ravan to resonate with unnatural frequency. The broken spiral. The human ship drifted past the Imperial border, untouched by the construct's growing field. Kale, watching from the archive, whispered in awe. They came back. And in Sector Vale Zero, for the first time since its appearance, the construct pulsed not with analysis, but with pause. The human ship did not stop, did not hail, and did not respond. It merely moved, gracefully, steadily, through the edge of the construct's event field, the distortion halo that had erased entire planets without resistance. But this time the field shimmered, bent, and parted, as if acknowledging kin. Inside the Imperial Command Dome, silence gave way to awe. Even Virel stood frozen. What are they doing? She asked. Ravan's glow dimmed, its voice reverberating like pressure through bone. They are reminding it. Reminding it of what? That once something refused to be measured. Within the small ship, a single figure stood at the viewport. Human, female, unarmored, no weapons. Her gaze locked on the construct, and though her ship had no broadcast systems active, a message pulsed from it anyway. Not digital, cognitive. To the construct, it was a signature more profound than any signal, a unique human imprint of defiance encoded in conscious memory. It wasn't a challenge. It was an invitation. Remember, in that moment, space folded, veil, Zero's darkness bloomed into patterns, recursive geometry flaring outward like petals of understanding. Time staggered. Observers across Nithari sectors saw patterns in their minds, glyphs that had no linguistic basis but carried deep personal meaning. The construct, for the first time, responded with silence that felt intentional. A breath held, and then something extraordinary. It retreated. Not in fear, not in defeat. In respect, the field contracted, the vanishing halted. Planets long gone did not return, but no others were lost, and the human ship turned, leaving as silently as it had arrived. On Arcaris Prime, Empress Virel turned to Ravan. Is it over? No, the Terrasect replied, but you've been given a moment, a pause, use it. What should we do? Kale Morin, still in the archives, answered from a private comm. Start remembering what we erased and what we feared. Because Earth hadn't just survived the scan. They had made it scan itself. Vale Zero no longer shimmered like an anomaly. It had taken on the shape of a wound, freshly cauterized but far from healed. And at its edge, the construct hovered, no longer advancing, but not idle either. It was watching. The change rippled through the Nithari sectors. Patrol routes rerouted themselves autonomously. Data cores began to self-correct for contradictions. Even Ravan, once immutable in its calculations, began revising predictions faster than ever recorded. But it was Kale Morin who triggered the next shift. While investigating more fragments from the Outer Scatter archives, he found a nested message encoded in visual redundancies, frames hidden between light pulses in the original human ship recording. A message, not to the Nithari, to the construct. We were erased once, not by you, by them. We refused to vanish. We became the variable. Let others remember what you forgot. Begin again if you must, but choose differently. Ravan processed the transmission and fell silent for nearly 6 minutes. A lifetime for a Terrasect. Then it spoke. It has transferred the role. Virel leaned forward. What role? The observer. In that instant, sensors across Arcaris Prime registered a new gravitational outline forming, faint, circular, positioned equidistant between the construct and the throne world. Another object was emerging, smaller, familiar. A second ship, Nethari in design, but marked with the human symbol. "It's us," Kale whispered. "A version of us, sent to learn, not survive." Viral's expression darkened. "Or to test if we've learned anything at all." Back in Veil Zero, the construct shifted orientation, facing the new ship, the second Watcher. And then the stars around it dimmed again. The scan had resumed. But this time, not to erase. To see who remembered the price of being understood. The scan concluded. Across the Empire, systems returned to their proper orientation. Power surges stabilized. The pulsing threat in the stars paused. Not vanishing, not yielding, but watching. Veil Zero became still. Then the construct blinked, the same way the probe had in the beginning. For 1.6 seconds, it vanished. Not from sensors, but from perception. When it reappeared, it was no longer facing the Nethari. It was turned outward, toward the void beyond. Where other forgotten coordinates waited, it had moved on. But it had left something behind. On the surface of the second ship, a new mark glowed. A spiral, incomplete, cracked through the center, but still holding form. Kale stared at it, breath shallow. "That's not a warning." "No," Ravan said. "It's a decision." A signal spread across the Empire. The Nethari were no longer being measured. They had been catalogued, not erased, not approved, but spared. A message was left in the archives, uncoded, universal. "Continue if you must. Remember if you dare." The Empress, now silent in her throne, nodded slowly. "We're still alive." Ravan's form flickered with unknown energy. "You are now the anomaly. What you do next will be studied." Veil Zero faded back into obscurity, like a scar fading beneath skin. The Nethari would rebuild, not as rulers, but as survivors of a test they never understood, passed only by the courage to face themselves. And in a distant system, on a blue and white world humans once called Earth, a receiver blinked. A signal had been acknowledged. The spiral, incomplete, was beginning to close. In the end, it wasn't might or technology that saved them. It was humility, memory, and the echo of a species long underestimated. The Nethari had gazed into a force that didn't conquer, but measured. A force that judged not on power, but on pattern. And they survived by choosing to be seen not as rulers, but as learners. Somewhere beyond the veil, Earth watches still, not as a savior, but as a reminder. Sometimes the only thing stronger than dominance is the willingness to change.